Welcome to the Owning Your Sexual Self podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Main, awesome wife and dog mom for life. I'm a sex therapist turned sex coach, and I run a successful business selling relationship enhancement products. I absolutely love talking about all things sex. So you can expect this podcast to explore all things related to women's sexual health because that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help you discover and embrace what brings you pleasure so that you can own your sexual self. If that sounds good to you, then keep listening and let's fucking do this. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to the Owning Your Sexual Self podcast. I am super excited today for our guest. This is definitely a topic that is very much out of my wheelhouse. So, of course, I had to bring an expert on because I get so many questions about sex and religion and all of the things in between. So I have on with us today Julia O'Donnell, and we actually know each other. We went to University of Michigan together, the sex therapy and sexuality education course that you've all heard me speak very highly of and speak about many times. And I'm very excited again to talk with her today. She is outside of Boston and she is working in private practice currently as a sex therapist. And again, with this specialty around, sexual and relational health, and finds that, like you were saying, Julie, you find that you draw a lot of people with these backgrounds of a negative religion when it comes to sex.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm very excited. So thank you again for being on today. I'm so pumped to hear about the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I'm very honored to chat with you.
Yes. Awesome. So tell us about, what does a life in your practice right now look like and specifically in regards to religion when it comes to sexuality?
Sure. So as I think is true for many sexual health professionals, my experience as a sex therapist has been informed by my own story, and I view sexual health really as a mission or a calling for my life. Rachel, when you and I completed our program at the University of Michigan, one of the faculty said something that always stood out to me, which is that sex therapy calls you as much as you pursue sex therapy. I completely believe that to be true. Mm. I see a fairly diverse clientele in my private practice. However, I tend to see quite a few individuals and couples with religious backgrounds. Rachel, as we were talking about before the podcast, all religious communities are very diverse. I personally grew up in a repressive, fundamentalist Christian community, which had negative and honestly devastating consequences on my own life. Mm. That being said, many religious progressive communities are doing amazing work integrating faith and sexuality. I work with clients on the broad spectrum of abusive religious communities to super healthy religious communities. Many of my clients are trying to reconcile their sexuality with their faith, if those are areas of conflict. Or I have many clients leaving religious communities trying to unlearn the negative messages around sexuality and trying to reclaim their own story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I will say that's definitely come up with me either through doing parties with Pure Romance or when I was working in private practice and even now within the coaching role. It's my favorite thing to do with people very early in the work is to ask them about their background experiences when related to, self-pleasure and just sex and sexuality in general. And religion is often something that comes up and it's often, as you know, it's generally from our parents kind of pushing this religion on us. And when you're raised in a household, it's like you just do and conform to what your parents are doing or what you're told. And then I think there's something that happens that when we transition, maybe it's middle school, maybe it's high school, maybe it's college for people, maybe it's after marriage, who knows? But then it's almost as if this whole new world presents itself when it comes to sexuality. And sometimes there's often these feelings of shame and guilt and resentment if you've even thought about exploring those things. Is that something is that common that you're seeing from people?
100%. Something that I've also noticed, especially recently, is that I will have clients say, okay, I didn't grow up in a religious household. Maybe my parents even had a fairly positive sexual perspective, but I grew up in the 90s or the early 2000s when purity culture was at its height. So my sex education still prioritized abstinence, still absolutely neglected pleasure, especially for women. So I tell clients, even if you haven't grown up in a religious community, most likely conservative religious ideologies have impacted you on some level.
Mm-hmm. And Julia, that sounds like that's the type of household that you were raised in?
Yes. My church community, my school community, and my family community highlighted values of purity culture. Purity culture tends to focus on rigid expectations around gender, abstinence only education, and very little support in people understanding even the basics of biology and physiology.
Wow. And now you're a sex therapist.
I joke, but actually I don't joke, so let me rephrase that. Who I am today is the person that my 16-year-old self would have prayed for to have some sort of conversion experience. I would like to hug my 16-year-old self because that's all I knew. My community was super insular. My church community was a huge part of my life. I spent all summers at Christian camps, and I went to a tiny private Christian school, so I had very little exposure to the outside world. I didn't grow up in a formalized cult, but in doing some cult research, my community had some strong highlights of what a cult community might be like. So I didn't know. Sometimes clients have a lot of shame in moving out of religious communities. They grew up with a lot of shame, and then they have shame that they didn't know better. And what I tell clients is, you didn't know. How could you have known? You had no other exposure or minimal other exposure, or you were taught that anything outside of what your church taught was evil and bad. So we work through two levels of shame, right? The shame around sexuality in the first place, and perhaps the shame that they participated in a community that was so damaging to them or to other people.
Yeah. And how do you help clients overcome this thought around shame or guilt associated with their religion and sex?
I don't think any easy answer exists to that. Like you were saying, Rachel, I always ask clients, how did you learn about sexuality? A big part of the initial work is unpacking that with a lot of detail. What were the explicit messages that you learned? What were the implicit messages that you learned? Who taught you about sexuality in or outside of a formal sense? The first part is naming what we learned about ourselves and what we learned about our body. And then hopefully the unlearning of what else might be true. As a therapist, I love many of the elements of narrative therapy. So we do quite a bit of work in the beginning to unpack the sexual narrative that has been present for my clients' entire lives. And then the work is creative and curious around, okay, what other narratives might exist? What might be true? And I try to use that language because it can be really scary for someone who grew up with sex negative messages to think about themselves as a sexual person. They might want to think about themselves as a sexual person, but that could be absolutely terrifying. So we're trying to rebuild alternative narratives and see what we can hold on to in those new spaces to explore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And does it come, so thinking more so the people that these beliefs are coming from, when you're working with somebody, is the expectation there that they then have to remove those people from their life or remove that religion from their life, or can the two coexist in a healthy way?
They can definitely coexist in a healthy way, and I honor however my clients decide to integrate or not to integrate faith into their lives as they pursue a new or more holistic sexual identity. I have many clients who say, I don't want to participate in any religious communities any longer. Completely respect that. That is somewhat the route that I have taken, although I still consider myself to be a quite spiritual person. I have other clients who say, actually, my faith and my specific faith tradition is really important to me. I want to figure out how to remain a Christian identified person while also pursuing the sexuality that I want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All the work is really brave work.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to say too. And a little bit earlier when you were speaking was saying that these people have undergone such a negative, upbringing, if you will, around sexuality, yet they're still here. They're still sitting there in front of you in your office. And so I think that's the beauty of this, is that they have undergone these things throughout their life, but they're still putting themselves first and they're still working towards making change and creating a more sexual future for themselves, really.
Yes. My clients are some of the bravest people that I know. As you know, as a sexual health professional, reclaiming sexuality, identifying sexual wants, pursuing the sexual lives that we desire and I would say deserve is hard work and brave work. So I'm incredibly proud of my clients and they truly inspire me. I learn from them, hopefully as much as they learn from me.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say as they're going through this journey of reclaiming their sexuality? What are the main challenges that they're faced with?
So often religious repression can take the form of what sex therapist Joe Port, who you know, would call covert sexual abuse. So even if a person doesn't experience a specific acute sexual trauma, growing up or being exposed to negative messages around sexuality can take the form of a cumulative trauma. So, for example, if a person continues to hear the message that female sexuality is dangerous, that their bodies are dirty, that sex is something to avoid, and all the other negative messages that people hear, it can have the same impact as an acute trauma. Depending on the situation, will share with clients or in other avenues that I actually experienced a condition called vaginismus, which is the involuntary contraction of the vaginal muscles that cause penetrative sex to either be incredibly painful or even impossible. From my own journey, and this is not everybody's journey, one of the ways that the cumulative trauma manifested was in my body. What I tell clients is that after years and years of learning that sexuality was essentially bad and dirty, my body internalized that message and my body was saying, hell no, nothing fucking is getting up here. That then fucked up my sex life, right? I wasn't fucking because my body got fucked in all of those negative sex messages. That's potentially a more extreme example, but I've had many clients who have experienced similar conditions or other types of physiological manifestations of sex negativity. It's a bit of a mind fuck is what I tell clients.
Yeah.
I've sadly also experienced some acute trauma, and actually for me, as is true for some people, not all people, the cumulative trauma of sex negativity has actually been a much more difficult thing for me to work through in and outside of my own therapy than a specific trauma. Obviously, both are terrible, but I reinforce for clients through sex education that this is a trauma over time when you continue to hear all these messages about your body, and it takes a similar kind of work to be able to heal and then reclaim sexuality.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that, because I'm thinking of people that I've worked with that were raised in this atmosphere where they just feel like if they're having sex, they're dirty, or the act of sex is dirty, or the act of touching themselves is dirty or shameful, that they almost minimize themselves in those feelings, because they're thinking, so I'm associating it basically with somebody was sexually assaulted and they're triggered during sex. These people with these negative sex influences are also being triggered, right? And a trigger is going to happen in the same way as the way our body and brain reacts in trauma. And then the piece that I'm putting together with this now is that this is, like you said, fucking with them based on their desire. Because if we're thinking up here, all of these things, and they're thinking, I'm dirty, this is bad, I'm doing something wrong, that's not going to make that sexual encounter a pleasurable situation for them, because their most important sex organ is not even turned on. It's thinking about something totally different and not good for them.
Right. Part of my own healing was actually participating in my own sex therapy. So I tell clients I know what it's like on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the first sex therapist that I saw was asking me about my background. And I said, oh, I grew up in this fairly cultish religious community, but I really don't think it impacted my sex very much. And looking back, I'm thinking, oh, that therapist was incredible, and she was in the room with me and engaged. I'm imagining she was thinking, oh, honey, a lot of work is ahead.
Yeah, but good work, and it's shitty, tough, very difficult work to go through. But as you said, yeah, I feel like our clients are some of the bravest, because it's already so difficult for so many people to talk about things related to sex or self-pleasure, and then you throw in the fact that something's wrong, or they have this limiting belief around it, and again, bringing up all that shame and guilt associated with it. I think that it's so hard to overcome those feelings.
Yeah, I agree. Hard work, but as you said, really good, beautiful, exciting work too.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what will you say are some of the biggest changes that you see amongst your clients when they can reclaim their sexuality? And I guess, what does that even look like when somebody says, yes, I've taken ownership of this. This is no longer an issue for me. How does that change for them? How does that change their life?
Sometimes clients will have really big, exciting, therapeutic revelations or experiences. Often the change is tiny baby steps in kind of, sort of, sometimes the right direction. I'm a pretty high achieving, solution oriented person. So I wish growth and progress were linear and fast. It takes time. So I ask clients to be patient in the process. For some clients, it might be, I touched myself for the first time, even if that wasn't a masturbatory experience, or I held up a mirror to my genitals for the first time. I had an experience with a partner in which I was able to stay in the moment. We were able to make out and I wasn't distracted.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a bit of the work is giving ourselves permission to be sexual people. I talk about coming out, obviously, with clients who are part of the LGBTQ community, but coming out as a sexual person is something that I believe we all have the right and deserve to do.
Mm-hmm.
So a big piece of this is being able to say out loud or with a partner or in therapy with the witness of someone else, I am a sexual person. I do deserve pleasure. I went to a sex store for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
I initiated sex for the first time. It might look different depending on the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And for somebody that is looking to start this journey or to get more information, do you have any resources or any accounts or anything that you would recommend for them to follow?
Yes. So for clients who are interested in maintaining a connection to a religious community, a book that I recommend is Shameless by Nadia Bolz-Weber. Nadia Bolz-Weber is actually a Lutheran pastor of a progressive, super sex positive church. She actually did a project, I think a couple years ago, in which she melted a bunch of purity rings and now has this golden vulva in her office. I would love to have a golden vulva made of melted purity rings. So that book, I think, could be useful for anyone who grew up in a sex negative environment. I think particularly helpful for clients who are interested in reintegrating faith and sexuality. Mm-hmm. Another book that I recommend is Pure by Linda K. Klein. In that book, she talks about the impact of purity culture on a generation of women, particularly women who grew up in the 90s, but it would be applicable to anyone who grew up within a purity culture type of setting. The book is interesting because it is half memoir and half research. Mm. Linda K. Klein does not necessarily participate in any kind of religious community. Unlike Nadia Bolz-Weber, she isn't a pastor, but I think that book could be incredibly relevant for someone who is starting to explore the impact of purity culture on their own sexual development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. I'm always one for linking books and things for people. As you know, we had to read many books and many articles in our studies, so I think that that's such a great resource for people and something that they can kind of digest on their own pace even, which is really nice.
Yes. Both of the books are super accessible.
Great. Is there anything that you felt was important for us to share on this episode that we haven't got to yet?
Two things. The first thing would be that in all of this work with clients who are working through their own baggage around religiosity, or clients who are simply trying to do good work around sexual development, at its core, sexuality is about our ability to access our own humanity. So reclaiming sexuality is a way that we are literally saving ourselves in order to live the life that we are worthy of living. I see pleasure as a birthright. And I know that your niche and passion is around self-pleasure for women. That sadly and tragically has been demonized by so many religious communities. So I am excited about the work that you and other people are doing. I actually recommended your podcast to someone else this morning in a conversation about female pleasure. So I absolutely see female pleasure as a huge hole within many religious communities. Mm-hmm. And I am always thrilled when clients are able to move in that direction. Sexual pleasure changes everything. Mm-hmm. When I was struggling with my sexuality, it impacted and devastated so many parts of my life because sexuality is holistic. Mm-hmm. So when sex isn't working well, it hurts so many parts of ourselves. And when we start to reclaim it, life becomes beautiful in a million other ways.
Mm-hmm. I love that you said that. I was just having a conversation as well about that today, and our sexuality is our spirituality and our highest connection to something bigger, right? When we can connect with that orgasm, we can connect with the source of the fucking earth. It's like, it's crazy. So yeah, the woman that I was talking to, she had said that exact same thing. If your sexual life, if your sexuality is not in the good playing field, right, it's going to affect so many other things in your life that you don't even realize, because you're not taking the time or not able to take the time to experience that side of yourself and unleash that side of yourself, if you will.
Yeah. I know you believe this. Don't settle for sexuality that doesn't work for you. Mm-hmm. You are worth the time to explore that, whether that's through therapy or coaching or your own research, whatever it takes, that is worth reclaiming.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know this episode has empowered so many people. Like I said, religion is something I get asked about so often in the work that I am doing. And as I said at the beginning, it's not my wheelhouse. I can work with people that experience negativity around religion and sex, definitely, but I love that there's people like you that are very well versed in this topic and that are out there helping people even further, this new side of them that they want to explore.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yes. And you mentioned too that you have your own podcast that is here starting. So please tell us what that is, and as well as if somebody wanted to reach out and find you, how do you prefer that they get in contact with you?
Yes. So my podcast is almost brand new. My partner, who's also a sex therapist, co-created it with me. We have several episodes, but we are still working to market ourselves because we're both busy therapists. We haven't had necessarily the amount of time that we wanted to do. Similarly to your podcast, Rachel, our podcast focuses more on narrative. We're interested in the stories of the guests that we have. I am hoping to convince you to be a guest on my podcast.
Of course. Yes.
And unlike other podcasts, we want the dialogue to be a peek at honest conversations that you might not have any other place. I am a huge podcast listener, so I listen to all different types of podcasts, and something, Rachel, that I love about your podcast and something that Jeremiah and I have tried to do is to actually let it be a bit unscripted, to have the moments and the conversations that might otherwise get edited out in other conversations, because I want folks to explore sexuality and its vulnerability in a way that they might not be able to, not just in other podcasts, but in other avenues as well. So the podcast is called Sex Evangelicals. So a play on ex-evangelicals, obviously with the sex component. So you can find that on Instagram at Sex Evangelicals. You can find that on Facebook. You could email us at sexevangelicals@gmail.com. I am happy to give out my email. I don't have social media that is outside of Sex Evangelicals because I do keep that private, but my email is julia.e.o'donnell@gmail.com.
Perfect. And we'll make sure to link all of that in the show notes as well. And the podcast, you can find it on like Spotify or iTunes or anything like that?
iTunes and Stitcher.
Stitcher. Okay. Great. Yeah. Yay. I'm very excited. And like I said, yeah, we'll definitely link that in the show notes, so that way it's just an easy click for them to find it. And again, thank you so much for coming on today. This was a great conversation, and something that I know people are listening, like thanking the both of us for starting this conversation today. So, again, I appreciate you being here.
Yes. Thank you so much, Rachel. This was a delight. This was really, really fun. It's a highlight of my day.
Oh, good. You're the highlight of my day because your smile and your energy is just so attractive and just so warm and bubbly and welcoming. So thank you for being you.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yes, of course.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you loved it, be sure to subscribe so you never miss a thing. And if you loved it so fucking much, be sure to leave a 5-star review. I'll see you next week, and until then, keep owning your sexual self.